It's an addictive hobby.
Gambling was my life. Any $20 that came into my bank account, gambled. I would take my baggy clothes and my hoodie, go down to the local whatever, play on the pokies. I was obsessed.
One that can ruin lives.
It had got to the point I couldn't pay a bill, and so I stole from my employer. I stole over $300,000.
In the 2022 to 2023 financial year, New Zealanders collectively lost $2.7 billion to gambling. And the way the industry's evolving, experts on the front line worry that figure is only going to increase.
People are just being bombarded by gambling advertisements. So that tends to normalise gambling and make it seem like it's just a normal activity or a normal part of life.
Now the government is amending the Gambling Act to crack down on illegal operators and regulate the market.
The government is auctioning off 15 online casino licences as it regulates online gambling for the first time.
Since 2003, when the Gambling Act was first enacted, and in the time since the first temporary exemption in 2020, the world, and New Zealand with it, has changed substantially.
But will it be enough?
I mean, there's lots we don't know. It's like the devil will be in the detail with some of this.
Kia ora, I'm Davina Zimmer, and on The Detail today, the changing landscape of gambling and the new bill that aims to make the addictive pastime safer.
Yeah, what we're attempting to do is channel people into a regulated market where people can know that there are standards that these companies need to uphold.
Internal Affairs Minister Brooke Van Velden announced the online gambling bill at the end of last year, which will amend the 2003 Gambling Act. Some of the details are unclear, but broadly speaking, she says this act aims to facilitate a safer and compliant regulated online gambling market, prevent and minimise online gambling harm, and limit opportunities for crime and dishonesty. It will also generate revenue for the government.
What we've ended up with is a high-level agreement for a licensing regime that will allow for, firstly, tax collection, but also harm minimisation standards and consumer protection.
The new regulatory system will be put in place from February next year. Later in the podcast, Problem Gambling Foundation's Andre Frood explains what we already know about the bill. But we begin this episode with her painting a picture of what gambling looks like in 2025.
Gambling today is just so different. You know, what we're seeing out there is just exponential growth of online gambling. We're seeing gaming morphing into gambling almost, where common popular games that young people play contain elements within them that simulate gambling.
Online gaming can be a gateway to problem gambling, and primary school children are allegedly being drawn in.
Children as young as 11 are racking up thousands of dollars in debt because of online gambling.
You know, it has just changed enormously over the years and growing as well, you know, and it's a global problem. The World Health Organization, they looked at some research around the growth of gambling, and industry analysts suggest that it could be as high as $700 billion by 2028. I mean, it's just huge.
And that's the money that people are losing to just online gambling or gambling across the board?
No, it's just gambling across the board, but it's just, you know, online gambling will contribute enormously.
It's tricky to put a figure on how much online gambling contributes to the overall loss, especially in New Zealand because it's not really regulated. But according to data collector Statista, the size of the global online gambling and betting industry amounted to about $61 billion in 2021. That figure is predicted to almost double to about $114 billion by 2028. Participation by New Zealanders in offshore online gambling has also boomed, from roughly 40,000 in 2009 to 70,000 in 2019.
People are just being bombarded by gambling advertisements. So that tends to normalise gambling and make it seem like it's just a normal activity or a normal part of life, which I think has really changed a lot over the years. We're seeing it very much normalised, and of course games as well, including the simulated gambling within games and the noises of pokie machines or the language that's used, spin the wheel or whatever it might be in the games.
And with this landscape of gambling changing, have you noticed the demographic of those gambling changed?
It is starting to. So we're really concerned that we are seeing a younger demographic. The Ministry of Health has identified, rangatahi, young people, as being a priority population, meaning they are disproportionately impacted by gambling harm. And we're just seeing it. We're seeing the TAB just targeting young people with their new Betcha app.
Join Betcha for racing history on Champions Day, March 8th. Featuring the all-new Kiwi slot race with an insane $3.5 million. Get amongst it by taking the reins and choosing your feature race promo.
So we're seeing a lot of that happen. We're seeing social media influencers targeting young people as well.
What's going on, you D-Gens? These are the top 3 gambling games on Roulette.
So I found an app that you can make some money while you game.
All right, boys, we got Roulette here. It's an absolute classic gambling game. You can't go wrong with it.
Morena whānau. Today's advice is put that last 20 haka in the pokies.
There's all sorts of things going on where younger people are being targeted, I guess, if you want to describe it that way.
Is there any pushback socially to gambling, or is it just still all part and parcel of this normalisation?
That's a really good question. I think there is pushback. I think people are tired of the advertising. There are no restrictions currently around gambling advertising. So you can be sitting down watching TV and see a TAB ad pop up.
Horses.
Giddy up.
Rain.
Who's good in the wig?
The number 3.
Muchacha.
Muchacha.
Well, come on, guys. Get your bet on.
R18. Bet responsibly.
On YouTube, and you just see enormous numbers of gambling adverts. So I think people are a bit tired of that and are pushing back on that, and we saw that when we did our petition to Parliament around banning gambling advertising, and we've got over 6,300 signatures on that because people just feel quite strongly about it.
So there are more ads targeting younger people, and now there's a new issue that the Problem Gambling Foundation wants its say in: online casinos.
The government's released more information on how it proposes to regulate online gambling, mainly as a way to get tax revenue.
For the first time, online casino operators will be able to advertise as part of a new market being opened by the government, sparking concerns.
The government is auctioning off 15 online casino licences as it regulates online gambling for the first time, and local operators fear they'll end up in the hands of foreign-owned multinationals.
So the government seems to have listened, because there's a new bill or an amendment to the current Gambling Act. Run me through that. What do you think it aims to do?
Well, I think just to give a bit of background around this, what we've seen with offshore online gambling, so that's New Zealanders betting on overseas gambling sites, we're seeing an increase in that. And although we haven't got any hard data around it, we do know from bank transaction data that people are gambling on these offshore sites. And that's perfectly legal to do so. It's only the advertising of those sites that's prohibited. But New Zealanders can gamble on those sites. So what the government is looking to do now is to licence up to 15 online casinos. So our Gambling Act is very old.
And currently, how many do we have licensed? None.
The only online operators that can operate legally in New Zealand currently is the TAB and Lotto.
Okay.
Yeah. So Sky City has an online casino.
New Zealand-based casinos are launching unregulated online gambling platforms out of Malta, which bypass local regulations. In New Zealand, it's illegal for casinos to provide online gambling services, but it is legal for people to gamble on offshore websites. Moving operations to Malta means these casinos still reach New Zealand customers. However, our laws and regulations do not apply.
And I think that's the same for Christchurch Casino as well. So they're operating a New Zealand company on the other side of the world. Wow. Okay.
And that essentially is to get around our law because they've been waiting for this regulation to happen, but it's taken quite a long time and there's no guarantee, of course, that they will get a licence. I mean, up to 15 is the magic number, which we consider to be a lot.
But I mean, you say it's a lot, and yes, 15 is a big jump from the 2 that we currently have. But if that means that we go up to 15 legal entities, isn't that better than where we are now, where we have a completely, arguably unregulated market?
Absolutely. And that's why we advocate for regulation, because in effect, sort of like putting guardrails around it. So to have these operators regulated and licensed within New Zealand and having to adhere to our regulations and our laws around harm minimisation and advertising restrictions, etc., is better than the way it is now, where people are still gambling on these sites, but, it's like the Wild West, essentially.
New online casino gambling licences to be auctioned off by the government will mainly go to large foreign operators. Documents obtained by RNZ under the Official Information Act show that local operators are alarmed by the government's approach. They're fearing that foreign companies will eat up their market share and siphon money away from the community grants that they distribute.
Well, fundamentally, we don't agree that we should be funding communities from the proceeds of gambling. So we think the Minister is correct in saying that it just creates a kind of perverse reliance on the proceeds of gambling to fund our communities.
Because it's similar with pokies.
Absolutely.
Correct me if I'm wrong, right? The proceeds from that go towards, funding the local rugby club or something.
Yeah, they're required to return 40% to community purposes. But we need to be thinking with pokies about where that money's coming from. And most of that money is coming from our struggling communities. And then it's going to fund community purposes. Often it does go to worthwhile causes, but we don't believe that any of that makes up for the harm.
New Zealand's a pretty small country. So when it comes to competing for these 15 legal licences, do you see New Zealand companies being successful?
I think that's difficult because we don't actually know what the criteria is going to be. They will go through an auction process.
Is that literally like, I'm imagining, a house auction where you've got all the business owners in the room and they're holding up paddles and it goes to the highest bidder? Is that what we're imagining here?
That's actually that's where I went with that analogy as well. But no, I think it will be a little different to that. But I suppose it will come down to a set of requirements. And do these operators meet those requirements? And some of those requirements are going to be around, host responsibility, harm minimisation, their track record in terms of issues that they might have had around meeting money laundering requirements, all of those sorts of things.
Then there's a matter of how much a company is willing to pay for one of these licences. And Andre hopes that when it comes down to it, the government won't let a higher bid override a safer option.
We would really hope that their focus will be on harm minimisation and really good, robust host responsibility to protect New Zealanders. And that's certainly what the Minister has signalled. But of course, we just don't know the details of what or the exact criteria.
With this increase in legal operators from 2 to 15, Andre hopes that there will be some restrictions around how they can advertise.
And I hope there's really significant penalties for breaches as well, because we need to stop this sort of thing happening.
How do you monitor breaching of the rules? Because, like you say, it's currently a wild west, and with the internet, what, are you going to have a team of people at the Department of Internal Affairs literally just tasked with scrolling through social media all day?
Well, look, I really hope so. I really hope they are resourced so they can, make sure that these operators aren't breaching our rules. I think it's really, really important that they can do the job of a regulator and make sure that there aren't breaches. And if there are, these operators should be fined. And a lot of them have been falling through the cracks. I don't think it's unique to New Zealand. I think it's probably been happening around the world. The only difference is that New Zealand is one of the last OECD countries to actually regulate online gambling. So we've sort of been targeted a little bit because we've been a bit slow off the rank.
Offshore companies using Kiwi influencers to promote their games here is illegal, but that hasn't stopped them from doing exactly that. Influencer Millie Elder Holmes has been fined $5,000 for repeatedly promoting online gambling for offshore websites. That's despite repeated warnings from the Department of Internal Affairs to stop.
To be honest, we did wonder in some cases if these influencers didn't really realise that to advertise overseas gambling is illegal. But now I think there's a lot more awareness out there, and it's really good that the department has issued a fine so that sends a message to anybody that it's illegal and they will get fined, and there are consequences if they continue to advertise for these operators. But they really need to be getting to the operators as well.
How do you crack down on these offshore businesses? Like, it's kind of like our issue with offshore scammers. Like, how do you find these people?
Exactly. And I guess that is why regulation is your best measure, so that you are then going to have ring-fenced licensed operators, and they'll use channeling to get New Zealanders to gamble on those licensed operators rather than on the overseas operators. So we should see less engagement with those operators.
So by introducing these 15 legal licences, you're not necessarily hoping that these offshore businesses will go away, but you're instead hoping that those gambling will choose to gamble on the legal side.
Yes, and it's our understanding that they'll kind of be channelled toward using the licensed operators. And also from a safeguard point of view and a harm minimisation point of view, if they're regulated in New Zealand and they're under New Zealand law, it's a much safer option for New Zealanders than gambling on these operators overseas, where if you lose your money or something goes wrong or you can't get your money out, it can be really, really difficult. And you don't really have any sort of comeback either, because they're not licensed in New Zealand.
Let's talk fines. Is there any increase in fine in this new bill?
Yes, I think the penalty if an operator tries to operate and target New Zealanders and they don't have a licence, that fine is going to be quite high. I think it's something like $5 million, which is really good. But we do want to see really tough, high penalties around advertising and making sure that these operators stick to the advertising restrictions, because if you have up to 15 online operators and they're all advertising, we just want to make sure that they operate within the regulations around gambling advertising.
Do you know what those restrictions around advertising will be yet?
No, we don't, but we do have a big list.
Okay, run me through.
Well, it's sort of understandable that they want to allow some form of restricted advertising so that New Zealanders are aware of the licensed operators. I can kind of understand that, but we want it to be time framed so that they can't advertise at times when young people might be exposed to the ad. We don't want to see just a whole aggressive marketing campaigns so that we're seeing social media and other platforms just being flooded with gambling ads. There's just got to be some sort of moderation. And I think the most important thing is just making sure that, young people aren't being targeted or, being exposed to these ads. And the messaging that they use, the language they use within the ads, they are also required to direct people who may need help, that they can direct them to services such as ours as well. So we do, yes, we've got a list of harm minimisation measures in general that we want to see just to protect people, because it's a really risky type of gambling. There's no two ways about it.
Online gambling, you mean?
Well, yeah, and particularly online casino gambling. We're essentially putting a poker machine online. So it doesn't matter which way you look at it. Yes, regulation is great. It's better than not having it. But it doesn't change the fact that it's a really risky form of gambling.
And back to fines. What about fines for people who promote these gambling advertisements?
If they're promoting overseas gambling illegally, then the fine should be much bigger than what it currently is.
What is it currently?
Up to $10,000. Well, it really should be much, much bigger, because we just need to set a benchmark, I guess, because promoting overseas gambling, even though it is prohibited, we've just seen so much of it. It has really been allowed to run rampant, really, for years.
And would you say it's quite easy to get away with as an influencer?
It seems that way at the moment because of the numbers who are doing it. And, you know, they're being targeted, so you sort of can't place the blame necessarily because they're being deliberately targeted by really unscrupulous offshore operators who know it's illegal to advertise overseas gambling here. I'm sure there's plenty out there that will ensure that young people are not going to be able to open an account or gamble online.
I'm just trying to get an idea of what that could look like. Would it be you have to upload a valid form of ID?
Yeah. And I think also just making sure that somebody can't use somebody else's verification. There just need to be really strict processes around that.
These 15 new online gambling businesses will have an age restriction of 18 plus.
Would have been nice for it to be 20, but it's just what the government has decided on. They've decided it will be 18. I mean, if you want to use a pokie machine in a pub, you only have to be 18.
Right.
So I guess it's just different for casinos. And of course, casinos, land-based casinos are open 24/7, or some of them are. So with online gambling, we were hoping it would be a bit higher because of the accessibility and the ease of access to it.
Ultimately, Andre says the goal is for the number of Kiwis who gamble to go down. But with these new changes, she's expecting usage to increase.
Because it's new to New Zealand, it's licensed in New Zealand, we just want to make sure that the harm minimisation measures and the real host responsibility measures are absolutely robust so that we can protect people. And, we've got lots of things around there that we want to see happen, like an exclusion system, an online gambling exclusion system, so people who may be gambling harmfully can exclude themselves.
Does that mean that they can ban themselves off the app?
Exactly.
Right.
Off all those licensed casino operators. There's just got to be a system where people can do that. And in other parts of the world, there are those systems. We'd like to see mandatory pre-commitment, so somebody determines the amount of money and amount of time they're going to spend gambling. We would like to see credit cards being banned because people gambling with credit is really risky. So there's lots of things that we want to see happen to make sure that we do get this right because we have concerns around it despite that. And I mean, there's lots we don't know. It's like the devil will be in the detail with some of this.
That's all for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. Thank you to Andre Frood. This episode was produced by Alexia Russell and engineered by Phil Benj. I'm Davina Zimmer. Ka kite.